On my video about how children are an oppressed class, a white leftist man said, "This is such a silly fringe issue. Why are we even discussing this in the face of America descending into fascism? Like, this country has real problems." Obviously, I blocked his ass because I'm not interested in putting up with that shit, but I think his position is not unique amongst leftists. But like, if you fail to understand how the systemic oppression, the abuse, the neglect, the indoctrination, the dehumanization that children in American society experience is tied into all of our other problems, if you are willfully ignorant of the fact that the suffering of children creates lasting trauma that has ripples through every other aspect of American culture, no wonder your work for liberation is ineffective. When you minimize, deny, exclude the oppression of children, and you say you work for liberation for marginalized people, your work will be incomplete and insufficient. You are going to fail. As I said in the other video, not only are children legally the most oppressed class in the United States, they intersect with every other marginalized class. And childhood is the one marginalized class that every single person in this country has once been a part of. And we all experience the trauma and the ramifications of having been dehumanized, abused, and marginalized when we were kids. If you think that the topic of childhood oppression is not a big deal because we're descending into fascism, then you don't understand history. You don't understand psychology. You don't understand why a big chunk of the reason that we are here in this position as a country is because of how we treat kids. The trauma and maladaptive responses that we have burdened children with contributes significantly to the experience that we are all living. Not to mention the fact that fascism knows very well how to weaponize that oppression of children by indoctrinating kids early. Using the schools, using churches. You need only look at what's happening in Oklahoma and Texas right now to understand what's happening in the schools. You need only look at what's been happening in the evangelical church since the 1980s to understand how far-right groups, fascist groups, know full well that the more that you oppress children, the more you control and coerce children, the more propaganda you funnel into their little brains while making them fearful, angry, bitter, disenfranchised. You make sure they feel powerless and then tie their loyalty to a fascist regime or a leader who promises to give them the power that they crave, to save them from their oppression. Like, do you not understand history? Elon Musk is trying to repeat 1930s Germany by creating a school in Texas, an elementary school, so he can start that indoctrination process ASAP. Like, no wonder we on the left are so impotent and so ineffective. The right is really good at harnessing the oppression of children, indoctrinating children in order to meet their goals. In order to play out their fascist playbook, you start with kids, you start young. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me that a leftist man would say, like, the oppression of children, like, why are we bothering to talk about these issues? We've got real problems. We're facing fascism. Newsflash, Pookie, children are human beings and they're members of this society who also have to live under fascism. But also, how fucking hard do you have to work to turn a blind eye? Like, how much internalized childism do you have? How much do you dehumanize kids, see them as less than, unimportant, in order to dismiss their suffering, their systemic oppression, the denial of basic human rights, and to also completely ignore the way that they fit in to the experience that we are having as a country now and how their lived experience has brought us to this point. We were all kids. Guess what? All those Trump voters, they were kids. You think that their childhood experiences did not shape who they became? You think that the way that they experienced childhood in the US doesn't shape how they voted? You think abuse and dehumanization in childhood doesn't make people susceptible to falling for strongmen? You think Elon Musk and Donald Trump aren't playing out their daddy issues? Like, there is childhood trauma on display, creating suffering for millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people. Now, I personally believe that the way that we raise kids and the way that we fold kids into community can radically transform society. Treating children like the human beings that they are, raising them with dignity and respect, including them as valued members of society, understanding their unique needs and limitations and accommodating for them. Think how much childhood trauma millions and millions of people would be spared. Think how it would transform society if millions and millions and millions of people did not carry that baggage into adulthood. They were free from that childhood trauma. I always tell my kids, I am trying to raise you in a way where you don't need to spend your adulthood recovering from your childhood. How many toxic and maladaptive behaviors, how many patterns of abuse would just cease to exist if we understood children, understood child development, and treated kids like human beings? And doing that has to start with understanding that right now we don't. That right now children are the most marginalized and oppressed class we have in society. We don't extend basic human rights to kids in America. It is legal to hit children in America. You think all those pro-spanking Trumpers weren't hit as children? You think that trauma hasn't impacted them? I firmly believe the root of almost every issue we face in society is the way that we harm children. Everybody was once a child. Everybody has childhood trauma. Everybody in America has been indoctrinated since birth. The American educational system is a propaganda indoctrination machine. Don't come at me if your kid goes to Sunnyside Environmental School in Portland and you think that that's not true and that it's a wonderful experience. I was just telling my kid about what it was like to go to school in Texas. I promise you the experience of kids in Oklahoma right now in Oklahoma public schools. I mean, even here in Southwest Washington, my husband taught at a school whose motto was shaping tomorrow's model citizens.
The sound bleeped out for a second, but we aren't raising independent free thinkers, raising kids to be self-directed. We're raising cogs in the machine.
Little workers. We are making kids into what we want them to be because we don't view them as fully human. I'm not even remotely sorry to be talking about this issue so much. It is so fucking frustrating to me to see people on the left who want to deny the experience of children, deny the struggles of children. Folks saying that you cannot describe the experience of children as being analogous to the experience of disabled adults. We hate kids, we loathe kids, we deny kids rights and access, primarily on their cognitive and physical limitations. Of course, you don't want me to compare children to disabled adults because you don't like kids, you see kids as less than. So of course you would find it offensive to connect children to disabled adults. There's your own childism on full display. Maybe unpack that a little bit. The same folks who want to minimize how terrible it is for kids in America are the same folks decrying school shootings and upset that, kids are not getting gender affirming care. Do you not see the contradiction? Do you not see it? Why is it so hard for you to understand that this is not a little issue? This is the issue. Whatever other worthy causes you are working for, I promise you they will tie back to the way that we treat kids, to the experience of children. And if you want to be effective in what other good and just causes you are pursuing, cannot minimize nor dismiss the experience of children, the oppression of children. When you advocate for kids, when you face realistically the suffering of children in American society, the dehumanization of American children, you understand the way that the experience of children intersects with every other person, every other marginalized class, every other form of systemic oppression that we have in this country, we can begin to see that working for child liberation is working for the liberation of all people. It's working to end systems of oppression. It's working to end fascism. It is advocating for everybody. It's advocating for a better world, a more just society. I said this on my backup channel about the alt-right. They have played the long game effectively for decades. The left has had no game at all. You think the far right taking over school boards wasn't strategic? You think them pushing Bibles in school wasn't strategic? Banning books? Trying to remove free lunches, pulling back SNAP benefits, food aid, Medicaid funding, early child care funding, supporting laws that promote children as the property of their parents, promote adult supremacy, parental control over child welfare, child rights. You think that all hasn't been strategic by the right and hasn't gotten us to where we are now? All of these things are connected. I'm begging you to examine your own internalized childism, to deconstruct from it. If you want to work for the liberation of all people and save this country from fascism, if you want to create a better world, your advocacy must include, and I would argue, must center children.